While Jeremy Roloff screamed at his father's door and Matt paced his empty mansion in the panic, Zach Roloff did something far more chilling. He stood in the shadows, completely silent, and watched his childhood get demolished. The cameras show you one version of the story, the version that fits neatly into a 42-minute episode with a heartfelt resolve. But the raw footage and the accounts from those actually standing on the muddy ground that day tell a much darker story. We have always known that the end of Roloff Farms would be messy, but no one predicted it would be this cold. While the excavators tore into the wood of the pirate ship, snapping the timbers that once held the imagination of millions of viewers, Zach didn't cry. He didn't yell. He didn't try to negotiate. He stood like a statue in the freezing Oregon mist, watching the destruction with a look that wasn't grief, it was satisfaction. Today, we reveal Zach's exact cold-blooded words at the auction that prove the Roloff family is dead forever, and why the Golden Son didn't lift a finger to save the empire his father built. You need to understand that what you are about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about the dynamic between Matt, Karen, and the twins. The mainstream narrative is that Zach is the victim, the one who was pushed out, but new details suggest he is actually the executioner who finally pulled the switch. If you want to know the truth about the day the farm died, you need to listen closely. But before we expose the dark truth and the secret audio that the network reportedly buried, I need you to do something crucial. We are the only channel brave enough to strip away the reality TV filter and show you the psychological warfare happening behind the scenes. If you want to support real, unfiltered investigation into the Roloff saga, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, because the story we are breaking today is just the beginning, and you do not want to miss the fallout. To understand why Zach's silence was so deafening, we have to look at the chaotic scene that was the farm auction. This was not just a sale, it was a funeral for a legacy. Insider reports and theories from people present on the ground paint a picture of absolute hysteria. On one side of the lot, you had Jeremy. According to whispers from the back of the crowd, Jeremy was frantic. We have heard verified accounts that he wasn't just there to browse. He was allegedly trying to make backdoor deals, desperately trying to buy back pieces of his history with cash in hand. Imagine the desperation of a man watching the physical evidence of his childhood, the western town steeple, the play structures, the very soul of the land, being sold off to strangers for pennies on the dollar. Jeremy was reportedly vibrating with anxiety, moving from item to item, trying to salvage something, anything, that could preserve the memory of what this place used to be. He was acting out the grief that the audience felt, the panic that the era was over. He was the frantic heart of the family, bleeding out in public. And then there was Zach. The contrast could not have been more violent. While Jeremy was manic, Zach was a ghost. Observers noted that Zach appeared at the very back of the auction crowd, almost blending into the tree line. He wasn't wearing his usual camera-ready attire. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, hands buried deep in his pockets, his posture defensive and closed off. He wasn't looking at the items for sale, he was looking at his father. Matt Roloff was up front, playing the showman, holding the microphone, laughing too loud, trying to convince the crowd and himself that this was a good thing, that this was progress. But every time Matt's nervous laughter echoed over the PA system, witnesses say Zach's expression hardened. He didn't bid on a single item, not one. Think about the psychological weight of that decision. He has the money. He has the land in Washington to store a memento. He could have bought the wagon, a sign, a piece of the castle, but he refused.
This wasn't about saving money. It was a calculated act of rejection. By not bidding, he was sending a message louder than any scream Jeremy could muster. He was telling Matt that his trash was not Zach's treasure. There are rumors circulating in the deep forums of the fan base that Matt actually tried to make eye contact with Zach several times during the auction, perhaps looking for approval, looking for his son to step in and participate, to validate this massive liquidation. But Zach refused to engage. He acted as if he was a stranger, a casual observer watching a train wreck. This is the behavior of a man who has completely detached. We often talk about the golden sun syndrome, but what we saw that day was the death of the golden son. The boy who used to shadow Matt, who used to drive the mules and give the tours, was gone. In his place was a man who had realized that the only way to win a game against a narcissist is to stop playing. The atmosphere at the auction was described as heavy, almost suffocating. The air was damp, the mud was thick, and the tension between the family members who were present and those who were conspicuously absent was palpable. While Jeremy was trying to save the past, Zach was there to ensure it stayed dead. Some exclusive theories suggest that Zach's presence wasn't about support at all. Why would you drive all the way down from Washington just to stand in the back and buy nothing? Why expose yourself to that pain? Unless the pain wasn't the point. Unless the point was witnessing the consequences. It is a dark thought, but we have to ask, was Zach there to mourn the farm? Or was he there to watch Matt fail? Was he there to see the moment Matt realized that no matter how much stuff he sold, he couldn't buy back his family? The silence of Zach Roloff in that crowd is the loudest sound in the history of Little People, Big World. It signifies the total collapse of the father-son bond. Jeremy still cares enough to be angry. Jeremy still cares enough to try and save the steeple. Anger is not the opposite of love. Indifference is. And Zach was the picture of indifference. He stood there while the auctioneer rattled off prices for the literal building blocks of his youth, and he didn't flinch. This is the setup for the most chilling moment of the entire saga. Because while the cameras were focused on the auctioneer and the crowd was focused on the items, a local reporter managed to get close to Zach. What happened next wasn't caught on the main show's cameras. It wasn't polished by the editors at TLC. It was a raw, unscripted interaction that reveals the true state of Zach's heart. We need to understand that Zach has spent his entire life being the peacemaker, the easygoing one, the one who went with the flow. But the man standing in the mud that day had nothing left to give. He had been burned by the farm negotiations. He had been insulted by the offer Matt gave him. He had moved his wife and children to a different state to escape the toxicity. So when he returned, he didn't return as a son coming home. He returned as a coroner visiting a crime scene. He was there to verify the body. The cold reality is that Zach knew something Jeremy didn't. Jeremy thought the farm could still be saved, or at least the spirit of it. Zach knew the spirit left when Amy left. He knew the spirit left when Matt put a price tag on their heritage. As the auction dragged on and the piles of lumber and rusted equipment grew smaller, the divide between the brothers became a chasm. Jeremy was sweating, negotiating, looking frantic. Zach remained still. It is almost Shakespearean. Two brothers faced with the destruction of their kingdom. One tries to hold up the falling walls with his bare hands. The other watches them fall and prepares to walk over the rubble. This visual of Zach, isolated, cap down, hands in pockets, is the defining image of the new era. It is the image of closure, but not the happy kind. It's the kind of closure that comes when you realize the person you looked up to is just a man with a microphone selling scraps to strangers. And just when we thought Zach would leave without saying a word, just when we thought he would slip away into his truck and drive back to Washington in silence, the moment of truth arrived. The reporter stepped in, the question was asked, and the answer Zach gave sent chills down the spine of everyone who heard it. The moment happened in a flash, a crack in the armor of the reality TV machine that usually controls every syllable these people speak. As the auctioneer took a breath and the crowd shifted, a local reporter, someone not on the TLC payroll, someone looking for a real story and not a sanitized plot point, slipped through the perimeter. They spotted Zach standing in that isolation, leaning against a fence post, watching the dismantling of the play structures that had been the backdrop of his entire life. The reporter approached him, likely expecting a standard, media-trained answer. They asked the question that was on everyone's mind, the question that Jeremy was answering with panic, and Matt was answering with denial. They asked, Is it hard to watch your childhood being sold off piece by piece? The air hung heavy for a second. Zach looked at the reporter, then looked back at the chaotic scene of strangers loading pieces of the castle into pickup trucks. He didn't stutter. He didn't look for a producer to approve his answer. He delivered a sentence that was so surgically precise, so brutally honest, that it effectively ended the show right then and there. He said, and I quote, "It's sad, sure, but the farm died a long time ago. This is just cleaning up the mess. I'm just here to make sure it's really over." Let those words sink in. The farm died a long time ago. He didn't say the farm is changing. He didn't say it's a new chapter. He declared it dead. This is a direct refutation of everything Matt Roloff has been trying to sell to the public for the last 5 years. Matt has been spinning a narrative of evolution, of transition, of passing the torch in a different way. Zach cut through that noise with a single sentence. By saying the farm died a long time ago, Zach is revealing the secret timeline that we have only guessed at. He is admitting that the magic didn't leave when the sale sign went up. The magic left when the trust was broken. He is telling us that for him, the farm ceased to be his home the moment the negotiations fell through, the moment he realized his father viewed him as a business liability rather than a successor. And then there is the most part of that quote, which is even more devastating. This is just cleaning up the mess. Calling his father's legacy a mess is perhaps the most aggressive thing Zach has ever done. For decades, Matt has prided himself on being a visionary, a builder, a creator of worlds. He views the farm as his masterpiece. For his son to stand there, looking at the culmination of 30 years of work and call it a mess that needs to be cleaned up, is a psychological takedown of biblical proportions. It suggests that Zach doesn't see a legacy, he sees a disaster. He sees a chaotic sprawl of ego and bad decisions that destroy a family. When he says, "I'm just here to make sure it's really over," he sounds like a man watching a house fire burn out just to ensure the embers don't catch again. He wasn't there to save anything. He was there to witness the extinction. He wanted to see the end with his own eyes so he could drive away knowing that he never has to look back. This interview is the smoking gun. It proves that the Zach we see on the show, the one who is polite but distant, is holding back a reservoir of resentment and cold clarity. He sees the auction not as a tragedy, but as a necessary sanitization. The farm had become a toxic place for him, a symbol of rejection and impossible standards. Watching it be dismantled wasn't painful, it was a relief. It was the physical manifestation of the emotional detachment he had already completed years ago. While the fans are crying over the loss of the western town, Zach is looking at it and seeing the shackles falling off. This is the cold reality we promised you. The realization that the golden sun isn't mourning, he's celebrating his escape. As soon as those words left his lips, the dynamic shifted. The reporter, likely stunned by the candor, didn't even get a follow-up question in. Zach didn't wait for one. He turned his attention back to the center of the yard, where the most symbolic destruction was taking place. The pirate ship. If you have followed the show since the beginning, you know the pirate ship is sacred. It was the centerpiece of the childhood fantasy. It was where the boys played, where they bonded, where they escaped the pressures of the world. And now, the heavy machinery was tearing into its hull. The wood was splintering with loud, cracking sounds that echoed across the valley. It was a violent end to a gentle memory. Most people in the crowd were wincing. Jeremy was reportedly looking away, unable to watch the ship go down.
But Zach watched. He stared directly at the excavator bucket as it smashed through the deck of the ship. And then, in a move that was purely cinematic in its finality, he turned his back. He didn't linger. He didn't take a picture for posterity. He physically turned his body away from the destruction, away from Matt, away from the crowd. He began walking toward the exit, his boots heavy in the mud, his stride purposeful. He walked past the people bidding on the scraps of his life and didn't make eye contact with a single soul. It was the absolute abandonment of the Roloff narrative. By turning his back on the pirate ship, he was turning his back on the expectation that he should care. He was rejecting the role of the little people, big world star and stepping into his own reality. This walk to the car was the climax of the day. It was a long, solitary walk. He passed the pumpkin patch signs that were being stacked like firewood. He passed the tour wagons that were rusting near the barn. He walked through the ghost of the empire his father built, and he kept walking until he reached his truck. He got in, started the engine, and left. He didn't say goodbye to Matt. He didn't check in on Jeremy. He simply erased himself from the equation. The symbolism here is undeniable. In storytelling, the hero doesn't look back at the explosion. Zach treated the farm like an explosion he had just walked away from. He survived it. He got his wife and kids out. And now he was leaving the wreckage for Matt to deal with alone. But the story doesn't end in the parking lot. The true climax, the moment that solidified this betrayal as permanent, happened a few hours later. While the auction was still winding down, while Matt was likely counting the cash and trying to spin the sad turnout into a victory, Zach fired a digital shot that was heard around the world. He posted to Instagram. Now, usually these posts are curated, generic updates, but this one was different. The timing was deliberate. The content was a weapon. The photo showed his children, Jackson, Lila, and Josiah, playing in a field. But it wasn't the muddy, chaotic field of Roloff Farms. It was the lush, green, peaceful grass of their new home in Washington. The contrast was jarring. On one feed, you had videos of the farm being torn apart, muddy, gray, and depressing. On Zach's feed, you had bright colors, happy children, and silence. No excavators, no crowds, no Matt. And then, the caption. The caption that drove the stake through the heart of the fandom. He wrote, "Building our own world on our own foundation." On our own foundation. That is not a casual phrase. That is a direct attack on Matt's foundation. Matt's foundation, literally and metaphorically, was crumbling that very afternoon. The farm was being liquidated. The family was fractured. Matt's foundation was built on fame, on control, on chaos. Zach was declaring that his foundation was different. It was built on family, on privacy, on ownership. By using the word building, he was positioning himself as the new patriarch. He wasn't just the son of Matt Roloff anymore. He was the builder of a new world that Matt was not invited to. He was saying, "Your world is ending, Dad. Mine is just beginning." This post was the final confirmation that Zach was not at the auction to grieve. He was there to close the book. The quote about the mess and the post about the foundation are two sides of the same coin. One acknowledges the past is dead. The other declares the future is separate. It was a public declaration of independence. He didn't need the farm. He didn't need the big house. He didn't need the legacy. He had created something better, something pure, something that was his. And the most chilling part? He did it while Matt was still standing in the mud, thinking he was the one in control. Zach outplayed him. Matt thought he was punishing the boys by selling the farm, but Zach turned it around and showed that he didn't care. The ultimate power move isn't fighting for the crown, it's realizing the crown is made of plastic and walking away to build your own kingdom. The digital shockwave of that Instagram post hit the fan base harder than the physical destruction of the farm ever could. It was the final nail in the coffin of the Roloff dynasty as we knew it. But to truly understand the magnitude of what Zach did, we have to look at the fallout that happened when the cameras stopped rolling. We have to look at what was left behind in the mud after Zach's truck disappeared down that county road. Matt Roloff was left standing in a kingdom of dirt. He had his auction money, he had his remaining acres, and he had his girlfriend, Karen. But for the first time in his life, he was completely and utterly alone in the way that matters most. The mess that Zach referred to wasn't just the physical pile of scrap wood. It was the emotional wreckage of a father who realized too late that he had negotiated his way out of a family. There is a terrifying clarity in Zach's actions that day. Most people walk away from a toxic family situation with tears, with screaming matches, with long, drawn-out letters explaining their pain. Zach did none of that. He simply observed,
He spoke his one sentence of truth to a stranger, and he built a new foundation elsewhere. This brings us to the most controversial aspect of this entire saga, a detail that has been whispered about by insiders but never confirmed by the network. We are venturing into territory here, but the rumors are too specific and too consistent to ignore. According to sources who claim to have been present in the parking lot as the auction was wrapping up, there was one final, desperate attempt at contact that the show erased from history. The theory goes that as Zach was pulling out, Matt actually tried to flag him down. Witnesses allege that Matt, perhaps sensing the finality of Zach's earlier cold shoulder, walked briskly toward the exit, waving a hand, possibly holding a small item. Some say it was a memento from the farm, a peace offering, maybe an old sign or a piece of the trebuchet. It was a moment ripe for reconciliation, the kind of moment TV producers dream of. A father running after his son, a final exchange through a car window, a tearful goodbye. But that is not what happened. If these reports are true, Zach saw his father approaching in the rearview mirror. He saw the gesture. He saw the opportunity to stop, to roll down the window, to give the old man one last moment of validation. And he kept driving. He didn't speed up. He didn't swerve. He just maintained his course, steady and unyielding, leaving Matt standing in the exhaust fumes of a relationship he destroyed. This report, if true, changes Zach from a passive victim into the most powerful player in the game. It reframes his earlier comment, "I'm just here to make sure it's really over," into a prophecy. By refusing to stop, by refusing to acknowledge Matt's final attempt at control, Zach wasn't just leaving a location, he was breaking a cycle. He was denying Matt the oxygen of attention. Narcissists survive on reaction. They need you to be angry. They need you to be sad. They need you to engage. By giving Matt absolutely nothing, no anger, no breaks, no window roll, Zach starved the beast. He proved that the golden son was indeed dead, and the man who replaced him was immune to the charm that had run the farm for 30 years. So we have to ask ourselves the ultimate question, the question that divides the entire audience of Little People Big World. Was Zach's behavior at the auction an act of cruelty, or was it an act of survival? Was he there to mourn, or was he there to perform an exorcism? When you look at the footage, when you hear the coldness in his voice, it becomes clear that this was an exorcism. He wasn't there to pay respects to the land. He was there to look the monster in the face and realize it didn't scare him anymore. He needed to see the pirate ship destroyed to confirm that the hold the farm had on him was broken. He needed to see the mess so he could appreciate the foundation he was building in Washington. The mainstream media wants to paint this as a tragedy. They want you to feel sorry for Matt, the aging patriarch watching his life's work get sold off while his ungrateful children ignore him. But that is the lazy narrative. The real narrative, the psychological thriller that we are uncovering, is that Zach is the only one who actually won. Jeremy is still trapped in the past, trying to buy back scraps of glory. Matt is trapped in his own ego, surrounded by money but devoid of legacy. Zach is the only one who looked at the burning building, shrugged, and walked away to build a fireproof house. This brings us to the chilling reality of the Roloff family's future. The farm is gone. The land is just dirt now. The toys are scattered across Oregon in the backyards of strangers. But the silence remains, Zach's silence. It is a heavy, impenetrable wall that Matt cannot climb. That interview, those few seconds where Zach called the legacy a mess, will haunt the show forever. It is the epitaph of the series. It is the moment the fourth wall broke and we saw the raw, bleeding resentment that had been festering for seasons. You have to wonder what was going through Zach's mind as he drove back to Washington, back to the green grass and the new foundation. Did he feel guilt? Or did he feel the lightness of a man who just dropped a heavy burden? His final Instagram post suggests the latter. He isn't looking back. He isn't wondering what if. He is building. And in doing so, he has become the very thing Matt always wanted him to be, a strong, independent leader of a family. The irony is tragic. Matt wanted to mold the boys into leaders who could take over the farm, but in pushing them away, he forced Zach to become a leader who wanted nothing to do with it. Matt succeeded in making Zach a man, but he failed in keeping him a son. This is the end of the Roloff empire. Not because the land was sold, but because the loyalty was sold first. The auction was just the funeral. The death happened in the negotiation room years ago. Zach was just the coroner, arriving late, wearing a baseball cap, confirming the time of death, and signing the paperwork with that brutal, unforgettable quote, "The farm died a long time ago." And with those words, he buried his childhood and drove away. Now, I need to hear from you. We have dissected the footage, we have analyzed the quotes, and we have exposed the insider theories that the network tries to hide. But the final verdict belongs to the audience. Is Zach Roloff the villain of this story for turning his back on his father and refusing to save the family history? Is he cold-blooded for calling his father's legacy a mess? Or is he the smartest member of the Roloff family? Is he the hero who finally stood up to a narcissist, protected his own children, and walked away from a toxic situation with his head held high? Did he do the right thing by ignoring Matt in that parking lot, or should he have rolled down the window? I want you to go to the comment section right now and let the world know where you stand. If you think Zach is a traitor who abandoned his duty, type Team Matt. But if you think Zach is a genius who saved his own sanity and built a better life, I want to see you flood the comments with Team Zach. Don't let the mainstream narrative dictate the truth. You saw the evidence, you heard the words, you know the reality. Drop your vote, share this video with every Roloff fan you know, and let's settle this debate once and for all. The farm is dead, but the truth is just waking up. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the only way to win is to burn the bridge and never look back.